Tired of bloating, fatigue and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delay release capsules. Real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Monday's episode of Trending. I hope you had a fantastic weekend wherever you are in the world. So it's the 10th of November today, so tomorrow will be Armistice Day. Yesterday was Remembrance Sunday, which is where pretty much the whole country gathers to remember those lost in the First and Second World Wars. There's church services across the country. Ex-military will wear uniform and medals and so on. I drove up and spent the afternoon with Gareth yesterday, and I drove past a church on the way, and there was lots and lots of military personnel all there in their uniforms with their families, laying down poppies and wreaths and so on. And Remembrance Sunday for me is always a very sobering moment in many ways, because you look and you think about the loss of humanity and the loss of life that would have occurred throughout those two world wars. You think about the men that would have fought through those conflicts on both sides, that would have lived and then died through absolutely abhorrent conditions in northern France and across Europe. You think about the families that were here back in Britain that would have got 2-line telegrams telling them their loved ones had been killed in battle. You think about the children that would have grown up without parents, the children that would have waved off their dads onto the boats off to France and never seen them again. And how many questions and how few answers are to come back from that. And there's still, you see it in pretty much every town and village across the UK. When I go for a walk in my local park, there's a memorial there for people that lost their lives in those conflicts. And I live in a tiny village, a tiny parish really. And this list has a good 50, 60 names of just people in my village that would have lost their lives in those conflicts. Times that by the amount of towns and villages there is across the country and across Germany and across France and across Holland and across other countries involved in, Russia, Japan, all those conflicts, all those countries that were involved in that conflict. And you can see the loss of life. And I think it's always sobering to think, right, how did that come about? How did we let that happen? And the very simple answer is that we let psychopaths, whether it's psychopaths in Germany, whether it's psychopaths in Westminster, we let them take control, and we gave them all the power to do all of those things in our name that then cost the lives of all those people that followed. And I look back and think, we're no different today. One of the first videos that we made as Iconic was a special that I made back in 2019 on Remembrance Sunday, which was highlighting basically what had we learned in all those years since. Because we can stand there with our poppies on, and we can stand there singing hymns, and we can do minute silence, and we can play the last post at Premier League football games, and we can all have sobering moments of remembrance. But then you look at the world today. Look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Look at what's going on in Sudan. Look at what's going on in Nigeria. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. Look at what's going on in Venezuela. And you can say, well, actually, what the hell has been learned? All that's happened really is the weapons have got a bit more sophisticated. The rhetoric's got a bit more aggressive. That's what's happened. Following on from 1945, there's not been a real look around and we've got to make sure that never happens again. That conversation hasn't happened, has it? The same people, whether it be Starmer, whether it be Trump, whether it be Macron, whether it be whatever, laying down wreaths and laying down poppies and saying we must remember those who fell before, they're the same people that are about to send our mums and dads, our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters to the next one. And are we going to sit back and let them do that again? The only way that that history does not repeat itself is if we learn from it. I could sit down and it would spend me probably half an hour, if not more, to write down all the conflicts across the world that have happened since the Second World War ended in 1945. Hundreds. Certainly tens of major ones, hundreds of smaller ones, probably thousands of very small ones, all of which will have cost the lives of people, all of which will mean today that wives are going to sleep without their husbands. Children are waking up without their parents. Mums and dads are waking up without their sons or daughters. How many times are we going to let them repeat this? This story I've got here from the Daily Mail, the irony is, I'll come to the story in a second, about 3 passages down on this after this story is one about nuclear Armageddon, World War III, must prepare, must do this. Do they not do irony? Do they not do that? But this is very important. This is what we're going to finish on today. D-Day hero. So D-Day for people around the world. You'll obviously do a bit of research, stick that into a search engine, you understand exactly what D-Day is. But D-Day hero, of which there's not many people alive that were part of that anymore, who said sacrifice of lost men and women of his generation wasn't worth what the country has become, and says the UK has gone to rack and ruin.
I can see in my mind's eye there were rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now. What we fought for, was our freedom. We find that even now it's darn sight worse than what it was when I fought for it.
Although he has a chest full of medals and a proud record as his country's oldest poppy seller, Alec Penstone insists he's not a hero. He says the heroes are all the dead ones. The heroes are those that we left in the Arctic and on the Normandy beaches, the 100-year-old says from his home on the Isle of Wight, ironically. But he said, in these words, what we fought for was our freedom. But now it's a darn sight worse than when we fought for it. In my own personal opinion, but evidently it touched a chord with every man and woman. My daughter's had so many messages from around the world since I've said this. It's because he's right. All those people that fought through that conflict would have been sold the fact they fought so that we didn't become a fascist, socialist country like Germany was in that time under Hitler, and that Hitler didn't take over the rest of Europe. That is how it would have been sold to these people, that we had to defeat the Nazis. We had to defeat that ideology. Since then in this country, there has been a progressive, and not just this one, but this one's relevant to this story because we're talking about this conflict. There's been a progressive push more and more towards a more centralised control system. There's been more impositions on people's lives, whether that be through surveillance, whether that be through increasing taxes that are giving people less and less choices financially, whether it be more and more red tape on businesses that make it more and more difficult for people to start things on their own, whether it be the decline of the medical institutions, the education system, the quality of the food supply, the water supply, whether it be the absolute surrendering of the borders. You can see why anyone that stood up and fought in that conflict on the sales pitch that they were doing it to preserve the freedom this country had or once had, you can see why they feel completely betrayed by what they have seen happen since. And this guy, 100 years old, so he'd have been born 100 years ago. 100 years ago in 1925. Can you imagine what he has seen? Can you imagine the transformation he has seen of this world and of this country in particular? He'll have seen it go from... He'll have seen the aftermath of the First World War as it would have been recovering. He'll have seen right through the Second World War and fought in it. He'll have seen the technological age come from nowhere. He'll have seen it all. So when people like this speak, it's worth listening up. because they have such a barometer of experience and knowledge of what the world was like, what it became to what it is now. These people we can learn so much from. So when he's saying things like this is more damning and more powerful than me or Gareth or Rich or anyone sitting here and talking about these subjects, because he's lived it. So I'd urge everyone to take a look at this story and do a bit of research into this man. He's done a few interviews over the last few days. Listen to what he has to say. It's very sobering, to say the least. And anyone with an ounce of respect in Westminster, of which there is a few, I would suggest, a very, very small minority of a few, should be ashamed and should be looking at this going, we need to sort this. They won't, but it's certainly something that should give the rest of the country food for thought.
As we that are left grow old, age shall not weary them, or the years condemn, but at the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them. We will remember them. Hooray! I'm surprised everybody, I'm still here, I didn't expect to be. I'm very lucky.